don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also listen to this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and we have a PayPal account for any donations that you'd like to give. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. Welcome, everybody, to the Gate Expectations podcast, where I bring in a weekly guest, talk all things Yu-Gi-Oh!, and get to know a little more about each person I talk to. It's the only Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast that is run by a full-fledged journalist such as myself. This is episode 38. If you haven't checked it out yet, you can check out earlier podcasts with guests like Crush Cards, Ruggles, Yassine, Pac, Distant Coder, and many more. My guest for this week is a Shonen Jump champion. He's come back to Yu-Gi-Oh! With his own YouTube channel and is one of the old greats. It's Ryan Spicer. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, absolutely.
Always fun.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we had a fun a couple weeks ago, actually, where we kind of saw each other on a GOAT format, and we did a Patreon tournament together for commentating. So that's where we kind of came across. So, I haven't heard of your name so much in the past couple of years or so, but now in this past year, I've started to hear more about you again. And this is kind of a trend we're seeing now from a lot of players in the old guard. They're kind of coming back into Yu-Gi-Oh! At least in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not current Yu-Gi-Oh!, but at least you're back in some way, man. So, what kind of rehashed your interest with Yu-Gi-Oh?
What rehashed my interest with Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah.
Well, so my good friend, actually, the video I just completed recently on Chris Ferber. So he was living out in Florida, and he was my roommate for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And him and I guess some friends from back in his area in New York, Devin Schwartz. I think Joe. I think he's close with Joe as well. I don't know how to say his last name. Yeah,
Gerlando. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's relatively close with him as well. And being roommates, they were playing a little bit on Dueling Book, and then he was just here and there mentioning it to me. And then Kyle Bowling, Austin Coleman, are some of my closest friends I've stayed in touch with throughout all the years. I constantly fly out to California and Texas to spend time with them, and they come out to Florida and see me.
Nice.
And anyways, during 2020, with a lot of free time on our hands for a couple months, we started hopping on, doing video calls, just playing against each other, and we're with GOAT format having a mini renaissance going on right now, which hopefully I would like to see it turn into a bigger one. It kind of piqued my interest a little bit, and then Yu-Gi-Oh was obviously a huge impact in my life because I competed in it for 10 years. So ever since I left the game, I've always had a little bit of nostalgia where it's man, I kind of always miss those days of traveling, competing, and just being on that global stage and stuff. It was just a really, really fun part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the opportunity to play a little bit more kind of popped up. It was appealing to me. And then briefly, I kind of flirted with the idea of learning the new format.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy named Casey reached out to me on YouTube, and we spent a few hours playing some of the new cards, like the Alistair, Invoker, and stuff like that. And while I really appreciated him helping me and taking the time to explain the new mechanics and everything, it quickly dawned on me that I just have no interest in playing the new formats of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of reinforced my interest in the more retro Yu-Gi-Oh! And then it just kind of made sense to me. A lot of the people I grew up with and traveled with, competed against, a lot of us are later stages in life at this point. So it makes sense that retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Might make a little bit of a comeback. And I like to think that if I can be a part of that and help that come to fruition, I would love to see that, because it would be awesome. And I kind of low-key envision a day where maybe 5 years down the line, potentially there's medium to large scale retro Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments being held where you can travel to compete for prizes and catch up with old friends.
Do you think that this is something that Konami can even sanction, like going forward with this, like having older formats and kind of be like rehashed or whatnot? Because we've seen Konami before try to do like new formats here and there with like recent tournaments, like with like the Pegasus Challenge and like Duel Links and whatnot. But do you think there's a room for like GOAT format or even other formats to kind of take their place, at least on like side events or something like that?
Well, can you catch me up? What do you mean by the Pegasus event?
Okay, so the Pegasus event is basically where like you would duels normal, but then in the middle of nowhere they would shout like, okay, this random event just happened where like, okay, destroy all monsters on the board right now, or like draw to you have this many cards, something like that. Just like a random thing that happens. This is just an example, but it's just basically implementing like different kinds of Yu-Gi-Oh to be played. Like Magic the Gathering would have. They have like Commander, they have Standard, they have Modern, that kind of stuff. Like Yu-Gi-Oh having more formats.
And they would have were they sanctioning tournaments around that, or was that just more like introducing like a different like variant of the game? I guess
they were like
casually.
They were like side events.
I see.
That's all they were.
I mean, when I hear that specifically, that doesn't sound very appealing to me. Like just adding like this like complete random like element of like luck to the game doesn't sound super appealing, because Yu-Gi-Oh already has a lot of that, where it's like, the games that I was honestly shocked when I came back to playing Yu-Gi-Oh, like how much sometimes a draw can really affect things because of like like you only have 6 cards, and some of the cards are just like really powerful, where like Delinquent Duo obviously is like really really strong, and if you draw a couple pieces of the Trinity, it's it can be hard to come back from. But back to your question, can they sanction like older format events? I mean, I think they could, but I don't think they will, because I don't think there's a very large financial incentive for them unless they were to like start reprinting like old cards, which I think could be possible for them, because I think there would be a market for it eventually, but I don't really see that happening. And I think any progress we see in the retro Yu-Gi-Oh world is going to be decided up to like people making it happen. Like it's going to be people taking the responsibility and the burden on their own shoulders and being like, okay, like this is something I think there's enough people to get behind. And I think it is true. If you just look at all the various YouTube channels that have popped up with people making old content, I mean, my channel is like pretty small at this point. I've only been at it for a couple of months, but in the last couple of months, my videos have picked up to getting a few hundred views. And then when I look at Joe's, he's getting like consistently over 1,000. There's obviously people like Ruggles getting like insane amounts, or like Simo, or those kind of guys are getting an insane amount of views. And they do a lot of like stuff that's not only retro, I suppose. But when you look at it collectively, there's a lot of small scale channels that are doing this, and they're all consistently getting like 500 to 1,000 plus views. And I imagine there is some overlap in the audience, but all that being said is like I think there is some level of demand out there. Maybe the tournaments would be very low scale. Whoever organizes them probably wouldn't see a ton of profits being had, at least initially. But I think like if someone wanted to do it just for like the fun of it, I think that could be a thing.
Yeah,
I've even considered like depending on the direction the world goes as things reopen back up, and I've considered like maybe reach out to some people, and it could be fun even to have like a very small, where you have like you rent out a small space. Like I know a lot of people in my community in Florida. I could easily get a space that holds 50 people, and you could have like a tournament where you you get like 40 people or less to enter, and you could hold like a small like live tournament, and it could be fun for the people who used to be competitive in the game to fly out and be able to spend time with everybody, like even if it's not like a huge thing, I think there's some value to be had there just for memories.
Yeah, I remember I had this conversation with Chris Perovic, and the only problem with monetizing GOAT format, at least on a Konami standpoint, is that there's a cap on like what you can do with it, because we can't add any new cards to the format, because that's what GOAT format is. It's strictly limited to like a certain set, so you can only do so much with it, as opposed to like the regular game itself, where you can like keep releasing set after set after set, where like you can make money off of, but can't really do that GOAT format until you like run out. So I think that was like one of the big problems that we had with why we don't see GOAT format really being like capitalized on by Konami. Is just it's a monetary standpoint, just as you said.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is too is I've been kind of playing GOAT for the past, I would say like more consistently over the past like few months, from maybe let's say January of 2021 to I guess now we're in May. Going through periods where I played more than other periods, but even in 5 months, I've kind of found myself at a place where I'm a little bit burnt out from like playing a lot, because like you said, there, at a certain point, there's only so much going on. And initially I thought that would be like a really cool thing, because, being at a later stage in life where I have a lot of other stuff going on, I liked the idea of having a stagnant card pool, because I was like, sweet, like you don't have to like deck build, you don't have to spend as much time like figuring out like what's the best thing to play. But what I've kind of found is, part of the joy of Yu-Gi-Oh for me personally is, I like kind of analyzing a metagame and anticipating what people are going to be playing, and then, figuring out strategies to, counter that, and, leverage my, I think, I think I'm one of the better deck builders, like out there. So like for me, like it's just something I enjoy. So, so like, I guess when you're in a stagnant environment, you don't have as much possibility for creativity. But that's where I think like the idea of like retro comes into play. And, it would be cool to see like a website that's similar to GOAT format, but be expanded into like, maybe even like a retro format website where maybe they even host a different tournament every month, like a different format every month. Like I think that would be like a really cool thing to keep things fresh. And it would also take a longer time for the formats to accelerate. Whereas like when you're playing one format like GOAT, after 2 years, like the decks have become pretty like concentrated to just a couple decks that are like they seem to be like clearly standing out, whereas like, if these types of events were only happening on like a bi-weekly or monthly basis, and then you rotate to a new format, that like progression would take a lot longer.
Do you think that when we see a lot of the older players kind of go back and kind of resonate with GOAT format, as you said before, because like the format is so stagnant, and that we really can like take a couple months out, do whatever we want, and then if we decide to come back, the meta really doesn't change a whole lot? Do you think that's kind of a luxury for why we see a lot of these like older players kind of go back to these old formats, because they don't really have to learn anything too new?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's exactly what piqued my interest in it initially. And, because like I said, like that was a large reason for not learning the new format, because I quickly realized the amount of time it would take to like stay competitive and up to speed on things with, constant new releases, constant changing formats, constant changing ban lists. Like it's just not realistic for me at this point. Whereas, the old formats, it's like I can hop right in and have a pretty good idea of like what's going on. I may not be, I'm definitely not anywhere nearly as like skilled as I used to be, like technically. but like I still, I can still hop in and like have a pretty good idea about what's going to be good and all that.
How long have you been out of the game for, like competitively?
I want to say my I want to say my last like day 2 finish at like a Shonen Jump Championship / like YCS Yu-Gi-Oh Championship Series. I want to say it was in like 2011 maybe. In that kind of era. It might be even 2010. I remember I made like top 16 or top 8 at like the nationals. I remember I made the nationals. Chris Ferber won, actually. He beat me in the top 16, I want to say. And then I think the following year, I think I kind of got more into the vending side of the game, and I think I decided not to compete in like the following year national. I went, but I just did like traded and stuff on the floor. And then I think for a little like 2011 to 2012 or so, I kind of like got wrapped up in like, I guess, stuff outside of Yu-Gi-Oh. I was in college and I had lost a bunch of weight at the time.
Yep.
And it turned out that, I wasn't a bad looking guy after I lost the extra weight. So I started getting attention from women for the first time. And so that kind of distracted me a little bit from competitive Yu-Gi-Oh. And I started, going to a lot more like parties and raves and stuff, and kind of got mixed up in kind of like the fast crowd. And I started, just doing more of that kind of stuff, like having fun. And then I would go to Yu-Gi-Oh events mainly just to like trade, buy, sell and stuff like that at the, the hotel, the convention. And then eventually, I think my last event I ever played in was in 2013. It was YCS Austin, and that might be the one where Billy won. I'm not 100% sure who won that one, or maybe it was like Carlos got into the finals. He was like a local guy from our comic book shop. But anyways, that was my last event, and I remember just being like really out of touch with the metagame. I remember I entered the tournament playing some like trash deck. There was cards I didn't even like. People were playing cards in the metagame where I didn't even know like what they did. I was like reading cards and that's when it hit me. I was like, oh man, I like really lost touch with the game. And that was my like last time playing in a competitive setting.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I loved how Yu-Gi-Oh events for me were like Saturday nights, Saturday like afternoons, because that way I would play locals, and then afterwards I'd go party into the night. So that's how I kind of get my like party like lifestyle with Yu-Gi-Oh. And then second of all, you told me that you at least tried to learn a little bit of the newer cards and whatnot. Did you feel like it's a completely different game from what it was before, just because there's like being out for so long, there's like way too much information to absorb?
Well, yeah, I mean, it literally is like they might as well call it something else. Yeah. They changed the game mechanics. But like, I mean, to be fair though, like I don't want to be overly critical because, I was thinking back on that. Like initially I was like kind of critical of it because I was like, man, they changed the game mechanics. They introduced all these new game mechanics. They like changed the rules. But like when you really think about it, like they were doing that all along. It's just like when you're like in it, like I guess you're not or I wasn't quite as aware of it, because during my time playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I mean they introduced XYZ, they introduced synchros, so it's like they did create new game mechanics, but I guess like it wasn't as like apparent to me because I was like just so in it. And then when you take a break and then they're like, okay, we have pendulums and now we have like I don't even know what else they have. They have other dynamics. I don't even know what they are. But what you said, yeah, it's really true. Being out of the game for, let's see, it's like 8 years now. It's like so much has came back, and there was a time like in maybe 2015, 2016, even just being out for a few years, I was like again, like you had that nostalgia, and I kind of looked at it a few times. I talked to like Juan Morales, and that was like the feeling I got was like, wow, like this is really overwhelming, and there's just so much. It was just like this huge wall you'd have to like get through to even like get up to speed, and it just felt like way too much effort, and just didn't. I just didn't have it in me at that point to do it again.
Yeah, it's almost like seeing a child and then not seeing them for several years, and then after that you see how much they've grown. It was like how where did the time go kind of thing, and that's kind of what we're seeing here with Yu-Gi-Oh. When you even take just even a couple months out, because that's where I'm right now. Like I haven't played for several months, and then when I look back in the new format now, it's like, okay, this is completely different now. I have to learn like a whole new like set of skills, like a whole new set of combos, whole new set of decks, and everything like that. And I can kind of only imagine that you feel like the same way when you try to at least get yourself like somewhat familiar with like the newer meta.
Yeah, and it makes me like wonder. It's like, how do people even do it? I mean, like you gotta really be like interested in the game to get through that like level of challenge, because it's just a lot of information to have to like absorb to get back into it, and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it really does, because back when we were playing in like the late 2000s, the early 2010s, we'll say in like late 2000s, like we would our first turns wouldn't take more than like maybe like 2 minutes or something like that. We wouldn't do it, but now we get like a lot of turns where it takes like 10-15 minutes to do it, and that's just
Are you serious?
Really? Yeah, I like we've had like 10-15 minute turns easily before. It like because a lot of turns are like big combos, set it up, and there's like a million different paths how to get there and whatnot. Where as opposed to like let's say like let's take an example like D Heroes, like let's say the deck you won with Chicago. You wouldn't take like 5 minute turns. Well, you'd maybe take like a minute or two to process your turn and go with it.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't even know if I would take a full minute, but yeah, I know what you mean. It started getting a lot more complicated, I think, around like when XYZs got released, plus like with the plants and stuff. I remember that being a time where like the game definitely like became a lot more complicated when it comes to just like mapping out your turn, because there's just like so many things to consider. So like if turns are taking 10 or 15 minutes, that's just like absurd.
Yeah, I think that the only time really when you were actively playing, when we had an example of like this, is when the Phantom Darkness came out, and we went to like you go like Costa Mesa and Columbus, like those tournaments where we had like the FTKs that happened, and then you'd have like and return games would take like maybe like 5-10 minute turns, if you remember like that format. But then that's when they had like the emergency ban list and kind of like shut a whole lot of these cards down so we can have like a little more semblance, because I'm pretty sure you were around at least during that time playing.
Oh yeah, I remember Costa Mesa very well.
Yeah, and then then Columbus afterwards. I think you were there at Columbus, were you not? With when Jerry Wang won the Shonen Jump Championship.
I was definitely playing during that time, but I think that was an event I missed.
Okay, got it. But I'm just like formats like that example where we saw like Dad Return just really go rampant, go crazy, and hit. And that would be the only time I think during the time you played where we had like the 5-10 minute turns, just because we were setting up FTKs minus out of like Vincent Tundo's FTK that we would do. Like I think that was it. Other than that, like we've had Yu-Gi-Oh be like a relatively like well-paced game and otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember. Yeah, I would say like a minute or two is like probably feasible. Probably, I mean, I would think a lot of them would go less than that, obviously, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of absurd to think that turns take 10 minutes, because you have a 40-minute time limit. So
yeah, exactly that. So like time has become like even like a mastery of its skill itself now, because some people will say like, all right, if it's game 2, if I know I'm going to lose this, I'm going to wait till the clock ends a little bit before, and then I'll just scoop, and then you'll just let them play out their turn, and then let you have an attacking turn with like less than a minute to go, and then like score damage and then win the game like that. Like there's a whole lot of new ways to kind of win the game now, just because of the way the game has changed and whatnot. So there's definitely a lot of new skills that have to be developed in order to play this game now, compared to like what you and I were like when we were at our peak back in before.
Are you still competing? Like, have you been competing like in the like recent events and stuff? Like, prior to 2020, were you traveling and competing?
Oh yeah, I was like before the pandemic. I was still like heavy into the game and whatnot. I was still playing hard, and I was, So I've seen the evolution of the game of how it's gone on.
So you've been like traveling to events all these years.
Yeah, like I haven't traveled to the States as much as I would like to, just because either like my career would be like get in the way when there's like a YCS happening, but like all the regionals and stuff I would like 100% go to, or like any cool events that happen, or any cool locals or whatnot. I definitely travel out to those for sure.
Interesting. So what are you what are you up to these days? I know you do some commentating.
Oh yeah, so I do commentating. Yeah, so I do that. I'm also a professional journalist, and I do that. And I'm an editor, so I do that like over 40 hours a week and whatnot. So that's kind of taking my life.
What do you like write for?
Oh, like I write for like a social news and media site. I just got this career like a couple months ago. I told everybody in my YouTube that I got it and whatnot. So definitely time is not on my side either now that I have this full-time career and whatnot. Yeah, what's up?
What is the what's the focus of the company that you write for?
Oh, the focus is it's supposed to be like really like lighthearted, like feel good news kind of thing. We're not like investigative journalism or anything like that. It's supposed to be like everything with like pink tinted lenses on, something like positive news kind of thing. So that's what I have to devote a lot of my time to now, and still able to fit up this podcast.
Is it like developing like posts for like social media then?
Yeah, in a sense, yes. Think of kind of like something you might see for like maybe like Vice or like BuzzFeed, something like that, but more on like a local level kind of thing.
Okay. I'm interested. Yeah. After the podcast, you should definitely show me some stuff. I would be interested to check it out.
Yeah. I'll definitely show that stuff.
I really like writing and stuff. So like whenever I hear like stuff like that, it piques my interest. So
yeah, absolutely. And I know you've done. I think you've done a little bit of writing yourself, have you not? For like Yu-Gi-Oh, like along the years. Like I can't remember if you've done like TCG Player or not.
I did a little bit for Ultra Reality Games.
Yeah.
But outside that, I haven't done a whole lot, and I think, and I'm not sure, how great the quality was back then. To be honest, I mean. My primary focus back then was, I was really committed to Yu-Gi-Oh at the time. So a lot of things outside of just like competing and stuff were on the back burner. Whereas now it's like I have a pretty consistent writing habit where, over the past like 6-7 years, I've written almost daily. And I haven't had any like professional training, but I've spent a lot of time just like writing like writing and reflecting on life and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like a journal almost.
Yeah, definitely a journal.
Yeah. Because I remember I would write for Metagame too way back in the day. Like I used to write Yu-Gi-Oh as well, but when I read some of that stuff, it's like, man, like I've really come a long way from like since I've been professionally trained now how to write, as opposed to before where I didn't have to write, and just kind of looking back on it now, it's like, yep, there's definitely a huge difference. But I mean, we all had our passions before. Like Yu-Gi-Oh is one of our passions, why we're here, and you get that you want to write, you want to do something for it, and now that you're kind of back in the game, you going to your YouTube channel now that you started a couple months ago. Why don't you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So, where do I even begin? I mean, basically, so let's see. Where do I begin with this?
Go right from the top, because you started out as like a poker channel for a little bit, and then because I know that's what you're big on right now, and then you started like transitioning more into like more and more Yu-Gi-Oh as we went along here. Like we saw like old school do like one with
So basically, I guess the history of my channel. So I mean, I guess I like right now I'm currently like a professional poker player. I've been involved with the game for maybe like 7 years or so. Like after getting out of Yu-Gi-Oh, I played competitive Magic for maybe a year and a half or so. Like I traveled and competed a little bit on like the pro circuit, and then after that, not after that, but during that time, me and Chris Bowling started getting involved with poker a little bit. We would go to like some of the poker leagues at like the bars and stuff that they would host, and just kind of like learning the rules of the game. And then, slowly started taking it more seriously. And then, eventually we both realized that there was like a very clear skill set to develop. There's the methodology to being a winning player and stuff. So, we started studying, there's a lot of training, like websites nowadays where you can there's one I'm subscribed to called runatonce.com. And they, I pay $25 a month to be a part of it. And basically they have, some of the best players in the world, who have made, millions, who've been professionals for like 15, 20 years. And they create content, and they articulate strategy, and teach you how to think about poker in a winning way. So anyways, fast forward to today, doing it full time as a profession. And for a little bit, I was kind of flirting with the idea. I was like, I wonder, would there be interest if I created content around poker? And I guess like pretty quickly, I became aware that I didn't really enjoy talking about poker. Like, it's just, I don't know really how to explain it, but I don't really like doing things too much that are like focused on myself. Like I like kind of shining the light on other people, because I think when I'm focused too much on myself, it kind of brings up a little bit of like insecurities and stuff, where it's like I'd rather just highlight the good qualities about other people rather than like focus on myself. So then fast forward to that, I've been doing poker for a while now, and YouTube has just kind of like always been a little bit of an interest of mine. And I was just kind of curious, I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh a little bit more. And then I was like, I do have like quite a few people who are subscribed to me for Yu-Gi-Oh, and they probably, I realized eventually, like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to be putting poker content on my channel that has like a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh people subscribed to me, because it's just not what they're into. So like, I had one night where I was like laying in bed, and I actually hopped on and I actually put a question on I made a video, like a 2-minute video, and I was like, hey subscribers, like what do you want to see? And because I was like curious if like people would respond. And I got some like interesting feedback, and then it just kind of made sense to me to, if I was going to put out content on that channel, just to make it like Yu-Gi-Oh content. And also like, so that was kind of like the beginning. And then what that led into was my interest in YouTube. I guess, give me a second to collect my thoughts.
Yeah, no worries. Of course.
So I wanted to kind of like create Yu-Gi-Oh content, and I also wanted to like use it as a way to kind of understand the YouTube space better. Like I have interest in creating content outside of Yu-Gi-Oh content. But I felt that starting with Yu-Gi-Oh content would be a good beginning place, because it's something I know well. It's something that people know that I know well, at least in the retro realm. So I thought it would be a good place to start, to just kind of get a better idea of how the whole like YouTube space works. So, I started off doing just like talking head stuff, where I was like, just playing, and me and Austin, Kyle, we would just like fire up and just play against each other. And I was having a lot of fun doing that for a while, but it kind of brought me to a place where it's like, I really would like to reach a larger audience. And I also want to create something that's more like meaningful, where, playing Yu-Gi-Oh and filming it and talking is fun and everything. And I enjoy like getting into the conversations with people in the comment section. And I know some people like that as well. And, it has its place. but I kind of envision my channel transitioning more into like creating content that, you know, can reach more people and be more meaningful. So that's kind of like where I'm at now, where, you know, I'm still creating more of the content where I'm just playing, but I'm also creating content where I'm working on content where like right now I'm creating like a player index, for example. Like that's the best way to describe it. With what I've released 3 of them now, where it's like a series called Yu-Gi-Oh! Legends. And basically like my vision for that is to go through like every Yu-Gi-Oh! Player throughout Yu-Gi-Oh! History who had an impact on the game, who was well known at one point, who accomplished something in the game. Like I even want to do people like Jason Grabermeyer, like Julia Hedgeberg, like Michael Coanum, like the people who are writers. Like eventually, I want to do an index that just kind of like documents these people who are influential in Yu-Gi-Oh! History, because you know, like if I just feel like, you know, I lived through that, and I know how awesome it was like to live through that, and I know other people feel the exact same way. And it's like you know, it's a common regret that me and Kyle talk about, was like, we really wish we would have taken a lot more pictures like during our time in the game, because it's like we really didn't take any pictures. So we have like 10 years of traveling and awesome times where like we have to rely on our memory. So basically I want to create this like index, this database where I can kind of encapsulate some of these memories. So like, you know, people can look back on that for, you know, the next 20, 30, 40, 100 years, you know, and just, you know, even though it's, you know, it's not relevant to, you know, 99% of the world, but, you know, the small slice of the people who are interested, you know, I think it's kind of a cool thing.
I really like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Legends series that you did. Like I think the first one you put was Ramus Lizzo of a Team Overdose. There's a picture of me in there with it. That's in your video, by the way. I know that was. I think that was in Philadelphia, which I love because, first of all, it gives me that whiff of nostalgia when I get to go back and, you know, revisit all these, and it also like brings back all the memories that I've had with this person or whatnot. Like I don't know Kyle Bowling very well, so I can't really do that with him, but or Chris very well. But Rymus definitely one person I'm pretty good with. It gives me that. Not to mention, it also gives me a bit of a dirt sheet on them, so that way I can like research. So I can have like all like the research of them, all in like one video or one source, because I do that with every single guest that comes to my podcast. I always do research on them before I do it, and you know, having it like without having to scour to like 5-10 different sites just to pick up information up. I can go to one little thing, and then that's what I like about your videos, is that it encapsulates a good chunk of what they are like into this video, and it's nice to kind of walk down memory lane with them too. And it was also nice to see a picture of myself in your video too, by the way. So, and I think that's a really unique thing that you're bringing to the table. And I always try to say this to everybody. It's like, you got to bring something different, bring something new. If you're going to go on like YouTube or stream or anything like that, what's something different that you're going to do? And I think this is like a really cool thing that you're doing that not a whole lot of other people have really done, is just let's do like a player spotlight of them historically. And and you just released one today about Chris Ferber, who's been a national champion before. So I think this is something that you can really build off of if you decide to keep going with your channel.
Yeah, and you know, I just want to tell their story, you know, because I just think it's interesting to, you know, kind of see like, you know, how did these people get into it, you know, what was it like for them during their time in the game, and then also I just think it's really interesting to see like what are people up to today, you know. I just think it's really interesting, and you know, it's one of many ideas that I want to do. You know, it was just one of the ideas. I was like, all right, this is where I'm going to start, and then yeah, and then, you know, just make progress on it. It's going to be a long time before it's completed, because I mean, those videos honestly take a really long time. Like I think like Chris's was probably the fastest one I was able to put out, but I think it took 6 or 7 hours, like, you know, like total between like starting it and finishing it. You know, I know Rymus's and Kyle's, they took more like 7 to 9. So, you know, they take a good amount of effort just to like get it through, because there's a lot of editing and you know, finding the information, and finding like good, compelling photos. Because the other thing that's really cool too is a lot of the photos are like the footage I'm putting in the videos are actual photos. So, for example, the photos that are in Chris Ferber's video, those are actual photos from his like time in Tokyo, from his time in like Amsterdam, France. So I'm not like just Google imaging all the photos and just using stock photos. I'm actually using photos like from when they were actually there.
Mm-hmm. And and you could really expand on this too if you really wanted to go down that road. Like you can even like interview them for a bit, kind of do like a where are they now kind of series, because that's what you're kind of touching up on. It's like where this is how they were before, and then you can say like this is how they are now. What are they doing now? That kind of thing. So if you really want to go further with it, there's a lot of things that you can really expand on with this Yu-Gi-Oh! Legend series. Like you obviously started like 2 weeks ago, so you're still in your early stages. But this is something that I think that you can really branch out on and like kind of ride for a while if you decide to go with this.
Yeah, I have I one of my upcoming ones is going to be really good. I think I'm actually doing one on Chris Perovic soon.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel a lot of pressure actually because I've been talking to Chris a little bit, and we're working with his family to get some like photos from his childhood so we can put together like a really cool thing. And I was like, he was telling me his parents were like going through old records and stuff, and then I was like, man, like that, I feel like that puts so much pressure on me now, because what if I make it and like it's just horrible? And then his parents spent all this time like going through these like old albums and like VHS or
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because a lot of this like footage may not even be like digitized for that matter.
It's not. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So
you have to like scan in the photos or like somehow like transfer it somehow onto like a video file or something like that. So yeah, like getting that kind of footage could be really tricky to handle. So if you can pull that off, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's gonna, it definitely adds another level of pressure, but at the end of the day, I'll do my best, and it'll be what it'll be, and that's kind of the way I've been kind of approaching it, is like, I kind of view those videos almost like an art project, where it's like it's kind of hard for me to like see exactly where they're going until they're done, but like so far. I've been really happy with the ones I've released. It's interesting because I'm creating them and I'm like unsure of what I'm unsure / unhappy with them, and then when I finish them, and I'm like, okay, like I actually like this. This is like not bad. This is pretty good. I definitely think there's a lot of room for improvement and stuff. Like, I'm probably going to start taking like some classes on like video, just video in general, just to kind of, polish up my skills, because a lot of it, I'm kind of just winging it. So, there's definitely room for improvement.
Is there like a vision or a goal on how far you want to get with doing this on YouTube?
Not really. I mean, I would like I guess my generic goal, I guess, is, I would like to create content that reaches a broader audience. I'm really inspired when I see, channels like the Dual Logs, where they're reaching like millions of people, and I'm inspired. I'm inspired by a lot of people on YouTube. JP Sears, and like these people reaching like just huge audiences, and I would like to think that with enough like time and effort and like dedication to like understanding the space, that I can create content eventually that reaches 10,000 to 100,000 or more. I mean, that would be, it feels really far off and everything, but I'm not married to it, but it's definitely like something I enjoy doing, and it's something I want to like work towards. And I think part of it is just like creating content that's worthy of reaching that, and like doing topics that are also worthy of doing that. Like I don't see the Yu-Gi-Oh! Legend series reaching like 100,000 people. because I think it's very specific to the people who are in the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh scene.
Mhm.
So I think it's limited to its reach. You know, I could see it maybe one day. I think it's a series that gains momentum as it has more, because I think it paints a better picture when you have like when there's like 20 or 30 of them completed, and then like someone can go through and look. It's like, okay, like there's a story for all these different people. I think it's more compelling, but I think the scope is a little bit limited to like maybe a few thousand. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I think it's probably pretty limited.
And when you talk about content creating, it's going to be like all Yu-Gi-Oh content, right? Or do you plan to mix like other content, or like going to poker, or like branching off to something else?
The content for my current channel, like Ryan Spicer Yu-Gi-Oh, that's going to just always be Yu-Gi-Oh content. But I do have interest in creating content like outside of Yu-Gi-Oh. So at a certain point, I'll probably create a second YouTube channel so I can like talk about topics that are unrelated to Yu-Gi-Oh. Like I've been reading this book called YouTube Secrets, and like that's something I was like confused about before, and I've kind of become convinced that a YouTube channel should really be focused on like what it's focused on, because people subscribe to you for a reason. So if people are subscribed to you because they like Yu-Gi-Oh, or they like what you have to say about Yu-Gi-Oh, they don't necessarily want to hear you talk about, like, I don't know, veganism. So so it's like it's kind of alienating to kind of force that on somebody. So but at the end of the day, I also have like an insane amount of like interests and ideas and other things and other topics. So I don't want to talk too much, because I think it's dangerous to like just talk big without having results and stuff. But just generically, no promises. Like I kind of envision myself creating a second channel where I do like research oriented topics and create like narratives and stories around it. I have a lot of like burning questions inside me, around things like psychology, religion, nutrition, things like this. And I would like to see myself research these topics more in depth, and then create stories upon like my opinions and findings and stuff, and then be able to articulate it into a story and share it with people. And I think because these are questions that I've like struggled with for 10 years, or like my most of my life, I think there's probably a lot of other people in the same boat that might connect with it.
Well, we got a couple of Yu-Gi-Oh players that kind of fit into that. Like Chris Perfect's like big into philosophy, so that's something you could really talk about. I also studied philosophy as well as top of journalism when I was in college. And Paul Leviton now, he's a big fitness buff, and he also does his own little health podcast as well. So I mean, you definitely have like sources like at your hand if you want to branch into those other different subjects that are outside of Yu-Gi-Oh. And speaking of which, you said you've been playing poker for a number of years. Is there anything that you've learned in poker that you think could have directly applied to when it comes to playing Yu-Gi-Oh at all?
Initially I thought when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh again, I thought so a lot, but I mean, honestly, like a lot of the information is, it's not that important, honestly. Like, at first I thought it was cool because my mind is definitely more number driven than it used to be. Like I'm not a big math guy, but being a professional poker player, you're forced to kind of become a little bit of a math guy, because like, I mean, if you were to write a job description for poker, it would look something like, I don't know, analyzing math formulas all day long.
No.
Like that's basically like what you're doing at a poker table, is like you're assessing you're assessing like math problems and then weighing in like different factors that would influence it. So like, so like basically things like, if, I have X amount of cards left in my deck, I'm referring to Yu-Gi-Oh now, but like say I have like 3 chaos sources in my deck and I know there's like 21 cards left, right? So it's like 1 in 7. I have a 1 in 7 chance of drawing a chaos sorcerer, so I have a 14% chance of drawing a chaos sorcerer. At first, I thought that was like, oh, that's really cool because I can calculate precisely the percentage of drawing certain cards in different situations, and I was like, oh, that's really kind of cool, and I kind of like like to pet my ego a little bit, and then I was like, well, it's not even that relevant, like to like be that precise with Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't think, because it's like, a lot of times it's just like superfluous information where like just having a feel for like what you're doing is usually sufficient in my opinion. Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like, okay, like I mean in this situation, like I kind of need to like manipulate the situation to like kind of look like this. Whereas like, it's like, okay, it's like I know I have 3 cast sources in my deck, and I know I need to draw one, but knowing the precise percentage like isn't really that helpful. But on the other side, I would say Yu-Gi-Oh really helped me become. I mean, I wouldn't say it helped me become, but I think it definitely gave me an upper hand like when learning poker, because of like the deducive reasoning that's used in Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like, it's like I summon like a BLS and they don't use torrential tribute. It's like, okay, like they probably don't have torrential tribute, so I can go balls to the wall. It's the same thing in poker where it's like, if someone raises to $20 and I re-raise them to 65 and they don't re-raise me, I can conclude they very, very likely do not have aces. That's just like a simple example, but it's a similar line of logic that you use in Yu-Gi-Oh that's very relevant in poker.
Yeah, because we can apply like another thing to like outs, for example. Like that's a term that's used both in Yu-Gi-Oh and poker. Like if you see like a turn or the river, it's like, okay, what are his outs? Like what do they have to be able to beat my hand and whatnot? And you kind of use that with Yu-Gi-Oh too. It's like, okay, what are the out? How can they get out of this situation that they're in right now that with against the board that I've put in front of them? And you want to try to limit as many outs as you can, or then in poker, it's try to figure out how many outs do they have and what's the likelihood of them like being able to have those outs to be able to beat your hand. And you kind of have to play them both hand in hand. It might take like a little bit of different skill as far as making those kinds of reads and determining the probability of that, but nonetheless that's kind of something you have to do in both games, is determining like the outs your opponent would have in the current situation that they're in, or that you're in for that matter. You can also play that same game with yourself as well.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
And that's probably like where the math comes in the most handy with Yu-Gi-Oh. Actually, is like, it's like, okay, do I need to apply like extra pressure right now because if they draw like, say they have like 3 deadly cards in their deck and they have, I don't know, whatever amount left in their deck. It's like, okay, if they draw one of those 3 cards, like, do I lose right now? And if the answer is yes, it's like, maybe I need to like take the risk and apply as much pressure as possible to end the game in the next 2 turns. Or am I in a good situation where I don't need to take the unnecessary risk and I can like, play a 5-turn game or something, So, I mean, that's probably like the most like relevant situation where that's applied, which I didn't really think about until you just said it. So
I played a little bit of poker, but not as much to the extent that you have. But I know a little, so I can at least draw that comparison, because I've definitely seen some parallels between the two, especially like making reads and kind of like reading your opponent as well. I used to be one of those guys where if I played poker, in high school, I'd actually like put the hoodie over top my head, and I'd wear sunglasses where you couldn't see through it, just so people couldn't get a read on me. But only read on my face, but people could still read like my body language, like my hands, the rest of my body, and whatnot. So that didn't work out as well as I would like to. But I mean, there's just little things that you can kind of get pick up on that can like transfer over from Yu-Gi-Oh to poker in my mind. So I don't know if that's how Yu-Gi-Oh's really helped you in the sense that it's gotten you better at poker or vice versa. But I just didn't know if you saw any parallels between those two.
mean, I would say like the main thing would be like maybe just being comfortable thinking in front of people. Like, when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, like you're thinking out like, your turns and stuff, and you have a person in front of you. So it's like, like I guess it's like learning to think things through in your head without like giving off expressions and stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess that would cross over to poker. But like your story, it's kind of funny because like something I learned after being in poker for a long time is it's kind of a myth. Like the whole like reading body language thing, like it's a little bit of a myth. It's not completely, but like it's definitely something I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to. Like when I'm playing, my primary focus, I would say like 95% of my focus is on the actual game, and basically it's like because it like what really matters is like what actions your opponent is taking, because it's like, I mean, they can they can say or behave in the most ludicrous ways, but like what really speaks is like what they're doing with their money. Like that's gonna like give you the most information, because most people who play poker, they're very they're just very afraid, and they behave very like passively with their money. So the only time they're willing to put in a lot of money is like when they have a really good hand. So it's like I don't need to like read their body language, because like I can just look what they're doing like in the game. But that's not to say like it doesn't exist at all. Like there are scenarios where like you can kind of read into like what your opponent's hand strength like might be, because say I bet the first street, I bet the second street, and say I bet like $200 on the second street, and maybe they kind of like pause a little bit longer than what you think is normal, and it might indicate that they're a little bit unsure. So then like they're maybe there's like a higher probability they're on a weaker holding. So if you fire the last street like really big, like $500, then maybe they'll fold. There's a little bit of that going on. I personally don't pay a ton of attention to it, because at the end of the day, like it's sometimes people can act like that just because like they're not skilled. So like they're generally they're just like confused, and they don't even know what they're doing. So like sometimes like it's unclear like if they're being genuine or like what's really going on. So the most reliable thing I focus on is just like the actual game. But
it's you care about the play within the game rather than the play outside of the game. In other words,
it's a primary focus.
Yeah, that's fair. I noticed that like some Yu-Gi-Oh tendencies that occur within the game itself. Like for example, like someone has to grab a calculator to calculate like math to see if they can go for an OTK or not. That tells me okay, they got a pretty strong hand, and they have the potential to be able to go all in.
Yes,
on me.
That's a great example. Yeah. Because it's funny because like sometimes, especially like if you're like not super experienced in poker, it's like sometimes you'll get these characters who will sit down and play, and like like they're really loud, like they're really loudmouth. They're like maybe they're wearing like gold chains and like gold rings, and they have their gold grill on, and they're just like talking a bunch of shit. But like when you might think like certain things about how they play, but then like you might think maybe they're like really crazy or something, but it's like it's funny because a lot of times those kind of people aren't as crazy as you'd think, and they're often like very, very passive like when it comes to playing. So if you made some like assumptions based on like how they're dressed, then you might be you might be in trouble.
When you mention all like the blinged out stuff and wearing it, poker player Johnny Nguyen comes to mind for me when it comes to
Right.
when it comes to like wearing out
Like
all
the
that
classic. What's he say? He says like, "Come on, baby."
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of my uncle. My uncle's a little bit like that himself with showing off a little bit of bling, having like the sunglasses and like the long like weird tricked out hair. That's my uncle in a sense. And I look at him like, yeah, that's Johnny Nguyen. That's Johnny Nguyen in a nutshell, pretty much what you described for people who don't know poker. Yeah.
And to be fair, I think it does throw off it can throw off a lot of inexperienced players because they get kind of distracted, or maybe they get like emotional and stuff because they're being loud and obnoxious and stuff. So it can work to people's benefit, I'd say.
Yeah, well, when we look at like Daniel Negreanu, for example, like he's one of like the biggest talkers of poker, but he's not talking crap to anybody. He's just really trying to know people a little bit better, but sometimes he does use that to his advantage because he can kind of get like tendencies out of people. Or, naturally, he's also just a really talkative and nice guy. That's just who he is. But he also like uses that to his advantage in a sense when he plays poker.
Right.
And that's how some people play. Like some people are really, really vocal when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh. Some people will talk their mouths off and talk to the opponent just to get more information. Like Dale Bolito and Chris Perovic, they told me, they want to know more about their opponent when they talk to them. And then some people, they just don't want to talk at all because they don't want to give away any kind of information whatsoever. They're just kind of stone cold. I think I don't think I've ever played him before, but Jason Holloway, when I notice when I ever see him play, he's very quiet and he doesn't talk a whole lot. And I think that there's a bunch of players out there I think that don't talk a whole lot in the game. They just keep their talking at a minimum in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know Jason pretty well. I grew up with him. He was in my circle, and yeah, it's funny because he's definitely very talkative when he's not playing. But yeah, that's probably true. Like in the game, he's pretty like focused on like what he's doing. Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because I remember I was kind of thinking back that on myself, and I remember like when I played Yu-Gi-Oh, I was never like a talker, but I was usually like very friendly with people when I played, and it wasn't necessarily like trying to get information. I mean, maybe it was like a little bit because you get a feel for how somebody is, I suppose. But it was more honestly, I think, just like breaking the tension, because sometimes there can be a little bit of tension there when you have two people who want to achieve the same thing, but only one of them gets to do it. So it's kind of nice to just, have good sportsmanship and be like, hey man, what's up? And then also it is important too, to kind of get a feel, because sometimes like there was definitely instances in like major tournaments where you talk to somebody and you get a vibe and you're like, oh, like this guy I think might be a cheater. And like, you get vibes on people and you're like, okay, like I need to keep an eye on this guy. Like that's definitely a thing. And I remember like, especially like, I remember when I used to play, like I would always ask people where they were from. And if they ever told me they were from New York or California, I would like watch them like a hawk, because like I just knew like the East Coast guys were like notorious for cheating.
And that was also one thing too, that when I would talk to people, it was also a way for me to also relax myself. Going back to when you said to kind of like relieve the tension a little bit, kind of really relieve the pressure. Sometimes it's good to have like a quick talk with the other person just to, when you get their story, but also just kind of, break that tension, put yourself at ease a little bit, because, I haven't topped as many, Shonen Jump championships as you have. So, when I ever get that chance, sometimes I get a little tense and like I need to do something to relieve that pressure. I need something to kind of feel a little bit better. And if I hear about my opponent saying, yeah, I've never been in this situation before either, it kind of helps me a little bit. But, the back end of it is like, oh yeah, if I'm going against Ryan Spicer, yeah, he's won a Shonen Jump championship. He's topped, 6-7 Shonen championships. I was like, well, crap. It can kind of backfire you in a sense. But, the general thing about it is that you can at least try to release some pressure, or at least, keep it a little bit lighter and easier as you go along. And you do learn a little bit, I think, with a pregame conversation with your opponent, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Fortunately, I don't know. I feel like, well, I can't say that. I was going to say, I feel like I performed pretty well under pressure, like during my time in Yu-Gi-Oh, but when I think back, actually, that might not be entirely true, because, I think maybe because I was relatively fortunate early on, that probably helped me like later on, like just feel more confident and comfortable because, like early on, like I literally like in my first two like Shonen Jump championships, I went undefeated in the Swiss rounds in both of them, and then I made like second place and then like top four, I believe. So it was like top four and then second place. So like pretty quickly, I was able to like get to the top and but like I can't say pressure didn't affect me because I remember, it's not famous anymore, but famously during the time when I got second place at YC or SJC Austin in like 2006 or whatever it was, where I lost to Tristan Patillo in the finals. Like I cost myself the game because I was moving too fast and I made a mistake where I basically like played a card in the wrong order and it ended up costing me the game because basically like it was a situation where I used like confiscation on him first turn. I saw his hand. I saw he didn't have ring of destruction. And anyways, I made some plays and then next turn he like T set. And then I had heavy Cyber Dragon and like Zaborg, and I think maybe like a Last Will in hand. And, and I kind of got excited and was just playing quickly without thinking things through the entirety. So I summoned my Cyber Dragon real fast. And then I was like, crap, like I'm clearly supposed to use Heavy Storm first, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, I used confiscation. He didn't have ring, so like I guess I'm just gonna use heavy now. And so I used heavy, and he top decked the ring. So like that was a huge mistake on my part. And so it's like that's a pretty good indicator that maybe the pressure got to me a little bit.
I mean, we've all been in pressure situations before, and we've won and we've lost some of them to say the least. Clearly you've won a Shonen Jump championship, so you've at least been able to thrive under pressure, but then you came second place, so you've succumbed to pressure as well. And it happens to a lot of us, and especially in poker too. There's always a ton of pressure playing that game. I always find, because you got to figure out, are you going to call? Are you going to fold? Like, you got to figure it out. You have to make important decisions every single game. And do you find that there's a lot of pressure in Yu-Gi-Oh the same way there is in poker?
Not really, because yes, when I played competitively, but now no.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, like like when I used to play, yeah, there was a lot of pressure because I had high expectations. I wanted, I was really competitive and I really wanted to win. Me and my friends, like we would test play. Like I don't know if anyone test played as much as me and my friends did, like honestly, because I remember we used to like literally like it was like borderline an obsession. Like, we would be test playing until like 7 a.m. in the morning. I remember like we would go to an IHOP at like 9 p.m. and we would literally play until the sun came up.
Nice.
like it's almost unreal. Like when I think back to how much we played, and this was like all throughout high school, and then also pretty consistently like my first like year or two of college as well, before I got distracted. But coming back to Yu-Gi-Oh, yeah, I definitely don't feel as much pressure. Like there was a couple times where like I felt like I found myself feeling a little bit bad because like I was playing a little bit and then I was like noticing, I would look back on some of my videos and stuff and I'll be like, oh, I made a mistake there. Or like I would make some mistakes where it cost me the game. And I was like, man, like it's a little bit frustrating to kind of like have lost like a little bit of my skill. And then I had to like check myself and I was like, well, like it actually just doesn't really matter that much. I have, it makes sense. I have other priorities in life right now. And, my mental resources are going other places. So it's kind of, it's acceptable to me to like, not be the best Yu-Gi-Oh player anymore. I'm perfectly okay with it now.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But when I was like 17, it was unacceptable. I had to be the best.
Yeah, and that was pretty much my mentality too. Like I obviously wasn't the best in any way, shape, or form, but that's the mentality I had. I always took every single like top cut game at that like as a high pressure situation, and I always liked putting myself like in those pressure situations because I wanted to get better and better, because there was so long where I would lose so many times on the bubble at regionals, and finally when I like cracked my first one, then it's like, okay, then it's actually not that bad. And then aside from I think one last regional I had before the pandemic hit, I haven't lost a bubble match since. Yeah, at least in like a high event anyway. I haven't lost a bubble one since. So I can at least like say that my clutch skills have gotten better. But but clutch skills are it's weird to talk about, because sometimes you can there's the argument where you can have them or you can don't, or like sometimes it just depends on the situation. It's case by case. I don't know where you stand on clutch being.
Can you what do you mean?
Like, can you like develop your clutch skill in a sense? Like, can you just be? Can you work on being better in the clutch, or is it just something that just occurs naturally
when you're under pressure?
Yeah, under pressure. Yeah. That's
oh yeah, like 100%. I mean, yeah, of course you can improve your your response to stress and stuff. That that was like a big thing I had to learn, with poker, because there's a lot of like you said, I mean, there's a lot of pressure like playing poker, a lot of stress involved, because there's money on the line of every decision you make. And what I've actually really found that's helped me a lot is early on when I started playing poker, I actually got involved in Buddhism, and I started attending a Buddhist meditation center to learn meditation. And then I kind of got interested in like the philosophy as well. And I started attending like Dharma talks, and, I would attend the Buddhist temple for a few years, like almost like 2 to 3 times a week. I would go like twice weekly for like the Dharma talks. And then I would go on Sundays as well to listen to like the meditation, and that really helped me like cope with pressure more, because there's just a lot of like really helpful perspectives that the Buddha taught on just like handling life situations. Like there's like concepts I just never had heard of before like being exposed to that. Like for example, I heard about this concept called called miserliness, right? Like we've all heard of like Scrooge the miser, right? It's like, but in Buddhism they have this concept of like miserliness, and it's like the state of mind that develops whenever like you're attached to material things, and it's like your mind creates this state of like clinging because it doesn't want to lose what it's gained, right? And it's very applicable to poker, because there's often times where like maybe you sit down and you're like, for me, for example, right, say I sit down and I'm planning to play like a 6-hour session, right? And say like I sit down and in the first 5 minutes I win $1,000, right? And it's like you have to be really mindful, and you have to be mindful to like not become attached to that money and let it affect your decisions, because it's really easy for that to happen. And it's something that happens to a lot of people, where say that they win a lot of money like in the beginning, well, they'll play a little bit more like carefully like later on, because they're afraid, like on a subconscious level, they're afraid of losing that money, and it makes them play worse, right? It's like that for anyone who's familiar with poker, like there's a term called tilt. It's like whenever like basically your emotions get involved, and it prevents you from making the absolute best decision, which is like all that matters when you're playing, right? It's like you should always just be striving to take like the highest like the most profitable decision, regardless, of what happens afterwards. So long story short, being exposed to Buddhism, it just taught me like different mental practices, and it made me aware of the power of breathing, and doing things like meditation, and doing things like breathing into my diaphragm,
Mhm.
and and like just like the power of like if you're like stressed out, if your mind's like overactive, just like setting a 5-minute timer, and then being like, okay, like just telling yourself, all right, for the next 5 minutes, like I'm just gonna focus on my breath, and whatever I'm worrying about, like I'll pick it back up in 5 minutes,
Mhm.
and like just giving your mind like a 5-minute respite to break that cycle of negative thinking. And so stuff like that I think helps. And then I think yoga is also something that can really help, because doing yoga taps into I think it's called the autonomic nervous system, or maybe it's the sympathetic nervous system.
Mhm.
But anyways, there's a system in your body where that yoga taps into, and it releases hormones and like biochemicals that allow your body to like just exist in a more relaxed state. So if you can be more relaxed, you're going to think more clearly, etc. Beyond that, I just want to touch on real quick too, for when I got out of Yu-Gi-Oh, there was a period where I found myself not wanting to experience that stress.
Mhm.
And as I've gotten older, I've kind of realized that, that stress isn't necessarily even a bad thing. When I think back to like Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, I remember like very often, like round one, feeling like kind of shaky and like cold and nervous. And I think there's a physical thing happening in your body when that happens, where that like basically like your hormones and your like certain things are being released in your body to kind of like get your body prepared to like focus and exert extra mental energy. And it's the same thing with poker, right? It's like I sit down, and in the first like 5 to 10 minutes, like maybe I have a little bit more nerves and stuff, and it's like my body is like producing adrenaline, it's producing like whatever else it's producing to kind of get myself into like the right mindset where I'm focused on what's in front of me. I'm not distracted by other things going on in my life. So in one sense, I think like the pressure, like once you realize it's actually there to help you, like your body evolved to deal with stressful situations.
Mhm.
So like if you can kind of just trust that and like lean into it, I think you're better off for it.
Mhm. Well, going back to the Buddhism part, because there's a parallel there that I recognize that I think we can apply it to here, with the limited knowledge of Buddhism that I do have, is that they're really teach you to be, like freedom from desire, and as you said, freedom of material things. And I think it's really useful. The sense of poker is that there's a term in poker that they call pot committed, where like if you got like too much chips on the table already, you're just gonna go on whatever hand, because you've already thrown a bunch of the money there, and like you just got to go with it, even though it's probably gonna be a bad play when you're pot committed, but you still do it anyway. And when you don't have that emotion that's connected to that money that you've just bet, like you don't care if you lose that, that if you just fold, you're gonna fight to live another day, and you don't get susceptible to being like baited, being on tilt. You can think with like a clear mind in the game, rather than like thinking with your emotions. And I think that's also something that a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players also get, that have trouble with, that they put a lot of emotion into the game, and that they can also be taken away because of their emotion as well. Because like if players get like completely frustrated all over the place, they're going to play with like anger, or play with like a different kind of state of mind where like they can easily be manipulated in that sense. And if you're like in the Buddhist practice, if you're free from all those emotions, you can't be goaded or baited in any way, shape, or form like that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say you can't be, but you at least have an awareness of what's happening, because at the end of the day, we're all human, and like we can all fall victim. Like like while I practice meditation, I practice these things, like it doesn't make me immune to like feeling things. And it's just, what it does is like it at least gives me the opportunity to like realize what's happening before I become too invested in it. And I can check myself and be like, okay, like maybe I need to take a break right now, and just kind of like check back in with myself. But something I was just thinking about as you were touching on that is like something that I've kind of something that's kind of like come into my consciousness over, I don't know, like the last like couple of years as I've gotten older. I just turned 30. Is I think it's really easy to focus on the wrong things, especially like in our current culture and society. It's like materialism is really, really pushed, and it's just like we're like as a society and Western society, like we're so well off. Like we just have so like life is so good materially because like technology has just made life just like unbelievable, right? There's just like we have access to literally like we carry the world in our pocket. It's like it's kind of insane when you really sit down to think about it. But like at that cost is I think a lot of society and a lot of people are struggling spiritually, and they've sacrificed a lot of spiritual values for material values. And I think that it's real when you have the mind frame that material things are the only thing that are relevant. And this is something I fell victim to for a long time, and I still have to catch myself because I live in the society, right? But like something that's been really liberating for me is just like appreciating different values outside of materialism, and just like realizing like like the value of life and stuff, and like the people around me and the animals around me, and just respecting that and realizing like that has greater value than any material thing can have. And I don't know exactly where my thought is going with that. It's just more like I think it's hard to quantify, and I think because it's hard to quantify, a lot of people disregard it and view it as not important. And that's something I mean, speaking from experience, that's something I've done in the past. And I have to like again check myself with is that very thing. But like just because it's not tangible and it's hard to like quantify it doesn't mean it's not important. And I would say it's very likely like the only thing that truly matters is developing a sense of that, and putting things in proper order, and that's something I have a friend who he lives in Canada actually, and he's a high stakes poker player. And I was struggling at one time with just kind of like keeping things organized in my life with poker, because there's a lot of situations where you're in a game and maybe there's say in a typical game, maybe your hourly win rate is like $60 an hour, right? But like say a certain player sits in the game and now maybe your expected win rate is like $80 an hour or $100 an hour, just because the guy is like just dumping money so hard. And in the past, like I would struggle because it's like I really feel like I should be taking advantage of these opportunities like when they present themselves. And like something that he pointed out to me, and he would also probably disagree with me in the sense that he would probably say, yeah, take advantage of the opportunity. But something I've kind of learned over my time, and let me get back to what he said. What he said is basically like, because poker is like it's in its nature, poker is a chaotic career. And he said like you have to build in like systems of peace, like because otherwise like you're just constantly going to be like pulled in like every direction. And I think it's relevant to anything in life, including Yu-Gi-Oh. Like it's creating like a structured system you follow. And I think this is where like ethics come into play, things like that. And basically you can't really lose sight of the system. Like say you're working for like towards like whatever goal. It's like you have to have a bigger picture and a system you're working towards. So in the terms of poker, it's like, say you're trying to, I don't know, like say you're just trying to like play like a 30-hour week or something. And, like from my experience, I found it's better to break that up into like equal portions throughout the week, rather than like trying to play like, 10 hours one day and then just like burning yourself out and like losing balance, because it's also really important to, take time to like exercise your body and stuff, because if you don't do that and you neglect that, you're going to burn yourself out. You'll start having health issues, and then ultimately like you won't be able to like perform well anyways. So like the system is, what I'm trying to say is the system is really important. And just as equally important for maintaining balance as everything else.
Keeping on this Buddhism theme here as we go along, do you find, I don't know if you ever like got angry or at all when you lost in Yu-Gi-Oh, but do you find yourself now after learning through this that you don't let when you lose in poker and when you lose in Yu-Gi-Oh, you don't let those losses get to you as much? Because I've had situations where if I've just lost a really bad game in Yu-Gi-Oh, like it spoils like possibly my entire day. Like even if especially if I'm out at like an SJC or a YCS, like I've had like bad losses get to me, and then like it's spoiled my whole entire trip and whatnot. And it can absolutely just ruin everything for that matter. And I try not to let that happen so much. So for you, do you ever like let the losses get to you that hard nowadays?
Well, let me start off by saying I definitely was impacted when I played Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
Like I remember I definitely cried after some events because I was like, and honestly, like I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I think that showing that, like, getting to the point where you're like crying, it's like it just shows you really cared about it, I will say that there's a time and a place for it. Like I never, like, if I lost like in the middle of a tournament, I'm not gonna like have an emotional break. But like say it was the loss that like eliminated me from the tournament. Well, it's like at that point, it's like it's okay for me to like let it out, because it's like it's not gonna affect my decisions because there's no decisions to be made, right?
Yeah.
But like if I say like I lost like there was like for example, the nationals in 2009 where Chris Ferber won. I made top 16 at that nationals, and I remember I lost my first round, and then I had to go undefeated for the rest of the tournament or I didn't have to, I guess, because it was top 64, but I went undefeated for the rest of the tournament until top 16. So it's like if I had let that loss get to me, that early, then I would have been done for, but say I lost the first round, say I lost the first 3 rounds, and then I'm like, dang it. Like I'm like, and then I have like a little bit of emotion, and I'm like, crap, like I'm just really upset about the results. That's totally acceptable. Fast forward to now. Again, like when I'm in a game, I try to disconnect myself completely from the results. And I just try to focus on, did I make the right play? And if I ever face a situation where I'm uncertain, or it's clearly that I made the wrong play, like either of those two situations, like I have a notepad in my phone, and it's titled hand histories. And basically, like whenever I get into a situation that I'm unsure about, I take detailed notes, and I'm like, and I write down all the details of the situation. And then when I'm not playing, I have like software that I analyze it with, and I'll shoot a text to. I have like 3 or 4 people that I trust in the game who I think are very good. So like I'll shoot them a text and get their feedback and see like, okay, like I'll be like, what are your thoughts on it? And then I'll take what they tell me and I'll compare it to like what I'm thinking. And then I can kind of see like, okay, like it's like I either disagree with what they're saying or I agree with what they're saying. And then also sometimes like you'll get in situations where, like I said, where I'm unsure, and it's like, okay, like this is what I'm thinking. But if I ask 3 or 4 people who are all professionals, and they say like they all think one thing, and then I think something different, there's a good chance I'm just wrong. And then I'm like, okay, like why am I wrong now? And then I can kind of correct my thinking and be like, okay, because like first of all, like if I'm the one person in our group of good players who like think something different, like I'm probably the one that's wrong, right? So like because of that, there's a reason, so I can kind of like reflect and figure out like why, like, what am I like, what is just wrong in my like thought process that's leading me to this conclusion, and then and that's kind of like the process for getting better. But post sessions, yeah, I mean, they really, I don't get affected too badly nowadays, like from like losses or wins as far as like emotionally. But I will say sometimes it's a little bit emotionally exhausting after like you've been playing for a few weeks, and it's easy to get a little bit burnt out because you it may not be like, it's not traumatic because like I very regularly I go on I go through situations where you lose like 500 to 1,000 or 2,000 in a day, or like maybe you make a couple thousand a day, so it's kind of normal at this point where it's like it's not really out of the ordinary to like experience those kind of fluctuations. The only time it's really painful is if you've been working all week and then you're just like break even for like 2 weeks or something, and then it gets a little bit emotionally exhausting because then it creates space for doubt where like it's like, man, like what's going on here, like did I lose it? And like, and the reality is like it's like, no, you haven't lost it. It's just like sometimes results take a while to like come to fruition, but it's like we have monkey minds, right? Like we're just advanced apes. And so we have this like part of our brain that has trouble with delayed gratification. So yeah, it's just, so yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
And I think we've had like we've seen our friends and even ourselves just can get tilted on the entire day and like kind of play differently because maybe they had a bad game or they got beat up, whatever it is, whatever the case may be, is that
honestly,
like we'll play differently.
Sometimes I honestly feel like when that happens, sometimes when I take some bad beats in poker, sometimes it almost energizes me where I'm like, it just makes me want to like, it makes me like, it kind of like reinforces my focus, I guess, because it's like, I don't know, I don't like losing, like even if it's something that's outside my control, because I can make the right play and still lose.
Yeah.
But like, no one really likes losing, and I guess, I don't know, for whatever reason, whenever I'm getting beat up, it just makes me fight even harder.
Yeah, it's just like, so how would you weather that storm then, coming off like a really bad beat or something like that, and like recovering in the game to get yourself back on track?
Well, so I have a lot of things like built into my like routine that helps me manage that kind of stuff. So say, for example, throughout a day of playing, I usually take a break at least every like 1 to 2 hours. I regardless of like what's going on in the game, I physically get up and I go for like a 10-minute walk and just kind of like, I get my blood flowing. Sometimes I'll like bend over and like stretch a little bit. Sometimes I'll go to like a private place. Like I'll go to like the top of like the parking garage and I'll do some like yoga poses actually. And just kind of like reset my body, reset my mind. And then I come back like refreshed. So that kind of helps me like maintain like a mindful frame of mind. That way, like if something like unexpected or something I don't want to happen does happen, I'm in more of a healthy like mental frame to deal with it. But if something was like getting to me, like sometimes, like for example, towards the end of like a long session, like say I've been playing for 6 hours, sometimes I can feel a little bit anxious, or like maybe like my legs feel a little bit like anxious, where like my body just really wants to get up and like move around. Like what I'll do is like I'll take more breaks, for example, like instead of taking a break every 1 to 2 hours, maybe I'll take a break every 30 minutes just until I finish my hours. Or maybe sometimes I'll even like stand up next to the table, because I find that sometimes just like standing up, getting the blood flow into my legs can help. Or like if I'm really feeling like, if I feel like it's really out of hand or something, which doesn't really happen too much anymore like these days, but there's definitely periods where it did. I think like sometimes just like either like moving down in stakes to finish out the day, like instead of playing with like say like a $600 buy-in, like I'll just move down and play in the smaller game where it's like a $300 buy-in. So it's like it's not as consequential if I make a mistake. So, just like reducing the stakes, or, sometimes I guess if it's really severe, you can just like, you can end your day and just like get back at it the next day. But you have to be careful with that, because if that becomes like a habit of like quitting too early, that can be detrimental. But it's definitely something I've done before, or quite often,
Well, with the time breaks that we have in Yu-Gi-Oh, where they can either take really long or they could be really fast, typically the former. And how could you really get yourself to be back on track there in such a shorter amount of time than as opposed to what you kind of gave us, which we can like at least like take a breath, step back, and just breathe for a long period of time, as opposed to Yu-Gi-Oh, where you don't have quite as much time to be able to breathe after like a hard loss.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know like that's actually fun enough. Like, so like I specialize in poker cash games specifically pretty much for that reason. Like I've like intentionally like stayed away from tournaments because there's like a schedule you're on. I just don't personally like that. I like being able to do things on my own time. But back to your question with Yu-Gi-Oh, I mean, it's kind of been a while. Like I do remember like sometimes of like, or say a round like lasted a long time, like you could quickly get into the next one. But if I recall correctly, like, I mean, you usually would have like a 5 to 10 minute break, right? Like in between rounds?
In between rounds, depending on whenever you're done and whatnot. Like let's say for like a regional, for example, if or like a really like high attendance local for that matter, then maybe there could be like maybe like 10 minutes, we'll say, like as opposed to kind of like the half an hour, like an hour you might have in between like poker or whatnot.
Oh, well, I wasn't saying I was taking a half an hour to an hour break. I was just saying every half an hour or every hour to 2 hours, like that I've been playing, I would take like a 10-minute break.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, just because Yu-Gi-Oh might have a quick turnaround. That's why when it comes to like
honestly, if the nature of what you're doing is a little bit different, we're like say you finish a round and like the next one starts in 2 minutes. I mean, honestly, like you just kind of have to deal with it, right? I mean, to the best of your ability. I mean, what I would say though is like another solution is like you could always usually the rounds are posted in the same area, right, where everyone congregates to see where they're sitting. So like what you could do as well is you could, after your round, go to that space, and if you want to do like a couple, like a 3 to 5 minute meditation, just you could put your timer on your phone and go sit near where these standings are going to be. That way, like if they get called in the middle of your meditation, you're right there and you don't have to like rush or anything.
Do you kind of wish that you had some of these techniques now that you did way back when you were playing Yu-Gi-Oh competitively in all these events?
I mean, I think it would be really beneficial if these things were taught in our like education systems. Just having like if people were taught to like actually care about like their mental health and like physical health, I think that would be like really, really wise to do in society in general. But I would say like I kind of honestly feel like I did have a little bit of it, like in a very strange sense, because like I'm no longer Christian, but like I was raised in a Christian like family and everything, and I held a lot of those beliefs and values.
Yep.
And I really think that helped me a lot, like cope with all the turbulence, that came with like traveling and competing and stuff, because I had a very like clear, like ethical and moral like frame that I was like basing my decisions off of. So, for example, like I wasn't tempted to like do, I don't know, like I wasn't tempted by like drugs, or like I wasn't tempted by all the different like things that, you know, you can be tempted by. But back to the Yu-Gi-Oh thing, funny enough, like I oddly had like a strange like spiritual practice when I was like in Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments where I would often like pray before matches.
Yep.
And when you look at it, prayer is really similar to meditation, because you know you're focusing your mind on something, right? So you're clearing your mind of like worries and stresses and distractions. So in a sense, like I feel like, you know, obviously it's different, but I think they have similar effects, and I think prayer is something that's really important. And at the end of the day, prayer, like to me, is, you know, it's basically like exercising gratitude in some senses.
Yeah, I've done something kind of similar too. Like before, like they would announce, they say like you know, round one pairings are being posted. You know, go find your table and whatnot. I would always like make the sign of the cross, kind of point up in the sky, and be like, "Yep, all right, let's do this," kind of thing. It's kind of like maybe like a pre-game chant, like, or like when I would go out before every single game I would play for like any sport, like if I played football or baseball, whatnot, I would do that quick little sign and like, "All right, let's go out and let's do this," kind of thing. It was like almost like my pre-game. It's a pre-game ritual in a sense, basically.
Yeah,
I'm sure
and I
a lot
think
of people have that.
Yeah, I think those are really powerful because they just, I mean, like it's like it's a repetitive thing that signals to your brain like, okay, it's time, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like for example, like when I like before I ever go play poker, like I like 90% of the time I'm like exercising or doing something. I do a little bit of a review to kind of get myself into like the correct mind state to perform. So like having those rituals, yeah, I think is pretty smart.
Yeah, it could be a way to like trick your body and say, "All right, it's game time. Let's go," and then put yourself in that game state.
I don't even think it's like tricking though. Honestly, I think it's real.
Yeah, yeah, that might be a bad word, but you get what I mean though. It's sending a signal to your body saying, "All right, this is the state that you're going to get yourself into now," and you know, kind of get your body into that state of like, you know, readiness and focus.
Yeah, it's intentional, you know, and I think being intentional with what you do is really important.
It definitely is, and you know, there's definitely certain like states where I have to be able to like play a game correctly, or like even when I go out in sports, because I did play a lot of that when I was in high school and whatnot. You know, I myself in this like certain state. I couldn't play if I was neutral. I wanted to get myself like hyped up. I wanted to be like happy. I wanted to be like less like determined, or like put like a chip on my shoulder, something like that to motivate me to want to like do my very best in a sense. You know, I didn't want to go in if I was like largely apathetic or anything like that. I wanted to go in like really caring and wanted to really give it my all when I was going out to play any kind of Yu-Gi-Oh event or any sport for that matter.
Yeah, what sports were you playing?
I played football, baseball, rugby, and I did freestyle wrestling as well.
All the sports.
I did as much as I could, man. I loved sports as a kid. I always thought them as athletic games. That's what they were, man. So I love playing sports as a kid, and I haven't got a lot of fitness now as I did before, but I loved sports way back then, and still to this day, it's still a big part of my life. Well, Ryan, man, loved having you on, man. We explored a lot of different cool topics that I've never explored before when it came to Yu-Gi-Oh about this. So thank you again for coming on to my podcast. Is there any shout-outs you want to give before we go?
Well, I want to say I'm happy we got to explore all these different topics because, you know, it's what I live for, man. I enjoy all these different things. As far as shout outs go, I mean, not really. I mean, shout out to Kyle Bowling, Austin Coleman. Shout out to you, David, doing your cool podcast. Shout out to Nick Palermo because I really like what he's doing. I don't know the people behind like Luxury Gaming or the other people who are hosting the tournament stuff, but I'm a big fan of the people who are taking the time to build something. It's unclear where it's going to lead, but I have a feeling, if people continue in this direction, I think over time we could see it develop into something that's pretty cool. These things often start off like this, where it's really unclear in the beginning, but I think eventually it could be something really cool. And I really hope that, maybe one day there'll be an event that, I can travel to every now and then and meet up with people that I grew up with, competing and traveling and seeing at different events across the United States. It'd be pretty cool to do something like that, even if it was like on a small scale.
Yeah, it'd be like having a Yu-Gi-Oh reunion in a sense, and
exactly.
It definitely would be awesome. Yeah, and I love what Nick Palermo, also known as Scully, what he's been doing with GOAT format as well, as we've seen. You've been recently involved with it now, and you're starting to get into it more now. I know you've done a commentary video about one of the tournaments that we did, the Clash of Champions that we had last weekend. So that was nice to get you in on that, and the tournament before the Patreon tournament that you and I commentated together on. So. Nice to kind of see you back in the game a little bit more, not the full effect of being in the game, but at least you're involved in some way, shape, or form again. And it was nice speaking with you, man. It was nice to have you on the podcast, bro.
Thanks for having me, man. And people out there who hear this, check out my channel.
Absolutely. Link will be in the description. That is Ryan Spicer, former Shonen Jump Championship and perennial topper. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, man. Have a great night.
So is there no video on this?
No, it's not video. It's just pure audio, man. So this is
okay.
how it, yeah. That's what it is.
Man, I was looking forward to doing video.